Hey y'all, welcome to my channel. I'm wearing my hoop earrings and my red lipstick to pay homage to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a congresswoman from the Bronx who wore hoop earrings and red lipstick on her first day of Congress to kind of tell, other hood girls that like they too can make it in Congress, right? And be part of a liberal system that helps, marginalized people. And she ran like on a platform of like socialism and like
Wait, didn't she vote to fund ICE?
uh Hey, how's it going, y'all? My name is Ruben, but you might know me as Queer Chicano Chisme. Today we're gonna do a chatty get ready with me, inspired by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You ready? Alright, let's go. Okay, so first we're gonna use my NYX professional makeup primer, and it's like labeled "Can't Stop, Won't Stop," because social justice can't stop and won't stop, or at least it shouldn't. But you know what can and will stop it? Neoliberalism. So I kind of wanted to do a primer on like why we should be more critical of the politicians and people in general that we support, right? Because I understand that like Ocasio Cortez is like, in some ways like a positive role model for young women, especially women of color. But I think that our idolization of her is kind of getting in our way of being critical of her, which leads me to foundation. And today we're using this like NARS foundation thingy-majigger. The color is a Syracuse. Yeah. And so I wanted to talk about like basically like a foundational definition of neoliberalism, because some people might be like, what is that? It's just a hot word people use to dismiss like seemingly progressive politicians. And I get it. Like, we're not supposed to like critique the good guys. And so people use the word like neoliberalism, and then we some of people feel like, oh, I identify as a liberal, like they're attacking me. But like, I mean, kind of they're attacking you, but it's like not without a good cause, right? So like, let's talk about what neoliberalism means. So neoliberalism is like more concerned with like attacking problem, right? And not so much the root of the problem. And that's because neoliberalism is not concerned with abolishing capitalism, which if we really want to like think about it is like the root of a lot of societal problems, especially in the imperialist core, which is what America is. And so what I mean by that is like, for example, like neoliberalism is concerned with like affordable healthcare, right? A lot of the times. But it's not talking about like, why healthcare is so expensive, or like why a lot of middle class folks are against like affordable healthcare, right? Because they're screwed over, because a lot of healthcare systems like benefit like more richer people, right? Or they're more accessible to richer people, but instead of like seeing like income inequity as a problem, people are taught to see like social welfare programs as the problem, right? Another thing is like this take on immigration. Liberalism is like, oh, like we shouldn't have like kids in cages, right? Or we shouldn't be separating families at the border. It's not concerned with like abolishing a system that even thinks about putting immigrants in like cages, or like even jailing them for seeking a better life, right? Because doing so will be basically indicting like US imperialism, right? Because why do a lot of people immigrate to the US? So for example, with Central America, which I've talked about before, right? We have people coming to the US seeking a better life, but it's like, why are they seeking a better life? And it's because the US messed up their homeland. But neoliberalism asks us to look away from that, right? It instead tells us to see the problem no farther than the border, or not in a way that questions like our way of life, right? Like why are things so inexpensive in the US compared to other places? Like why do we have so many creature comforts? It points to the root of the problem in the wrong direction, right? Like, oh, the problem with the system is that we don't have enough women or people of color in Congress. Not the fact that like the very notion of like a ruling government is the problem in the US, right? So that's what neoliberalism kind of goes down to, right? It's more concerned with attacking the side effects of the problem instead of attacking the root of the problem, which is systemic oppression, and more specifically, it's capitalism. But the thing is that attacking that system would mean indicting themselves, right? So all I'm saying is that like liberals benefit from the system in which they participate, so it's not in their best interest to undo it. And that brings me to concealer. I'm using this like NARS concealer. The color is like medium praline, whatever. Blah blah blah. And so yeah, we're using concealer today to like conceal all the ugly parts. They're not that ugly. But no, it like reminds me of how like, you know, liberalism helps those invested in like imperialism and like settler colonialism and this like oppressive system to not really pay attention to those bad things, right? Not really pay attention to the harms of capitalism because they're still invested in it, right? They're still invested in like the exploitation of the global south, of other colonized territories, right? And so liberalism is like more invested in like hiding all of like the bad things or of like that like basically make this government and this settler state like run more than like fix them, right? So it's not like let me fix systemic racism, let me fix the harms of imperialism. It's more like let me put a band-aid on this problem so that the people that are currently like squished by its oppressive system can live more comfortably, right? Or they notice it less. Not so much like, oh, let's get rid of it so that nobody's exploited by capitalism, so that nobody faces systemic racism anymore. Because ending all of these things doesn't benefit liberals or like the people who fund them, right? Because a lot of super PACs support, you know, Congress folks and Senate people. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez obviously like ran on a whole like super PACs don't fund me, which is fine and dandy, and I think probably like a step in a good direction. But her actions have shown that she's still invested in the imperial core, and that's like another word of saying like America. More specifically, it's like America as like the aggressor of other oppressed countries, right? America as the oppressor, America as like the beneficiary of all these harms to other countries. Because her voting patterns still show that she's invested in the American imperial core, right? And that's the thing. Like, making the life of Americans better shouldn't come at the cost of the lives of other people outside of the US, right? And I know that some people might think that's like very, like, what's that word? Utopian, but it's really not. Like, especially for people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who ran on a campaign of like abolish ICE, right? Something she obviously went back on during her first week in Congress. Which brings us to setting powder. Today we're using Laura Mercier's setting... Mercier! Which brings us to setting powder. Today we're using Laura Mercier's setting powder. I don't know why I'm using this, TBH. But every YouTuber that does the makeup stuff says to use this stuff. We're not cussing anymore because we're trying to get sponsored. Not just playing. We're trying to get them ad revenue, which apparently is the way to go.
You just
whatever, that ad revenue stuff. Which also might have y'all wondering, like, why is this mofo doing a makeup tutorial? And it's like, because makeup YouTube is so fucking profitable. So effing profitable. Like liberalism. Like, I like Alexandria. Like, she's like a nice girl. She's like like blah blah blah. But it's like, you can't just like vote against a thing that people trusted you that you weren't gonna vote on. Like, and it's not like she like directly voted for like to fund ICE. Like, I get that. Like, she voted as part of a bigger like deal that the Democrats put forward to kind of like soften this like government shutdown shit. And I get that she like signed up to like basically like exclusively help the American people or whatever. But like, why are immigrants' lives like the bargaining chip? Which if it wasn't her, like, I would get, right? If you're like some dead-hearted Republican, like if you were like that, like I get it. Like, oh my god, that's a lot. But like, she's someone who like was like supposedly this like super progressive like socialist backing, and to be invested in like a socialist future is to be uninvested from like a capitalist one, a nationalistic one. I believe, at least. I get that like not all leftists believe that way, but like we should not be invested in like this like Americans first type of thing. I think that like a good socialist, someone who's like not invested in capitalism, looks at like global welfare as someone like Alessandro Cortez, who obviously understands like systemic oppression, who understands like well, I would hope understands socialism if like if the FNDSA is going to be supporting her, would understand that like to be invested in socialism is to be not invested in deportation. Well, she said she wasn't, right, in the beginning, but she quickly went back on that, as like some of her tweets show. As soon as she was like voted in, she kind of did away with abolish ICE and started kind of taking on this more reform ICE type of thing, right? And it wasn't, she even in some tweets she put out, it was like, I don't want to stop deportations. Like she sees deportation as essential to like the fabric of the U.S., right? So yeah, she doesn't think that we should like be doing away with like ICE or deportation. She just thinks we have to have like a kinder deportation and immigration process, which like is like peak neoliberalism, right? Like you're not invested in trying to change the way shit works. You're just trying to make it more palatable to and like more humane, right? So like there's no such thing as like humane deportation, right? Just like there's no thing as like humane oppression. That's just not compatible. But the thing is that like unless we disinvest from capitalism, the only solutions that we have to these very like deep-rooted problems is to make them bearable, not to like destroy them altogether, right? Because destroying the problems will be essentially destroying like the fabric on which the oppressive American state was founded. All right, and now we're moving on to brows. We're gonna fill in my brows with this Maybelline New York Brown Define Fill Duo by Eye Studio, and it's like a blah. That's what it is. So I'm gonna fill you in on what a lot of leftists are calling Alessandria Ocasio-Cortez right now, and that is jokingly calling her like intersectional imperialism, right? Because a lot of people see like her presence and the presence of a lot of women of color and LGBT people in the government as like progress, right? And a lot of them are like, oh, they're people of color or they're oppressed people, so they're gonna know how to like run things better so as to serve us better. But it's like, just because people have faced certain oppressions doesn't mean that they necessarily know how to fix them, or that they're necessarily, well, it does look better like immediately. That they necessarily have everybody's best interest in mind, right? So, and what this is like a joke, kind of like a joke on like how Kimberly Crenshaw's concept of intersectionality has been misconstrued for people's personal gain, right? And if you're not familiar with Kimberly Crenshaw's work, she's a lawyer, an educator, and an activist who coined intersectionality in the late 80s. I want to say like 1988, 1989. And she used it to kind of bring light to the fact that like black women were being left out of like discussions of oppression and discussions of prejudice, right? Especially when it comes to like getting a job, right? He was basically pointing to the fact that like a lot of people were only seeing like one axis of oppression at a time and not seeing how like these axes of oppression like intersect to basically erase and further oppress certain people. So she first focused on black women because her clients had sued General Motors for discrimination based on the fact that they had like that they felt like they were being discriminated against and not being given jobs. But they lost their case because like General Motors argued that like no, they don't discriminate against women or black people because they obviously have employees that fit both categories. But what they didn't notice is that like for example, like all of their black employees were men and all of their female employees were white women, right? So that meant that yes, they fill certain quotas, but you know, black women still like would stand to lose, right? And that's a problem with seeing only one axis of oppression at a time. And so Kimberly Crenshaw sought to like fill in the gaps of like where other activists and social justice folks were what they were missing, right? The thing is that like now that's being kind of used for personal gains. So people are like, oh, I am like, you know, for example, me, like I am a brown Chicano from the hood, and so I know what all brown Chicanos from the hood need, right? And like, it's me speaking on it. So like, calling politicians of like marginalized identities like intersectional imperialists like calls out like the fact that like, as long as like you are playing ball with like the government, it's ultimately it's going to lead to you throwing a lot of people you claim to represent, right, under the bus. So now we're going to move on to mascara. This is Maybelline's the Falsies Volume Express. Yeah, so why do leftists joke around about like calling people like Alexandria like intersectional imperialists? Is because like they use identity, right, their identity to seem progressive, but ultimately end up doing the same harm that all other liberals end up doing. So what ends up happening is that we ended up adding volume to problems instead of fixing it, and they become a little bit worse too, because it's hard to call out people like Alexandria, because not only because like the right is giving her a lot of that like is admittedly like sexist and racist, but also because people feel really personally attacked. They're like, oh, finally somebody like me is there, and everything they do is amazing and perfect and benefits us, right? And like is in our better interest, right? But it's like, no, like not everything they do is good. As a matter of fact, a lot of what they do is bad. And so that's why problems end up getting worse, right? Because people are afraid to call it out when it's somebody that looks like them, when it's somebody that they feel deserves our praise and protection, which, like I mentioned before, like, she does deserve praise, and she does deserve to be protected from like all the bigotry that is coming her way just for being like a young, like, quote unquote socialist and a woman of color. So this is basically like me calling her out with like love and whatever, right? Or as much as I can love a fucking liberal, right? So I am trying to give her like some grace, but I'm also like, I'm as critical of her as like anyone that I would like to support and who claims leftism to any degree, right? And it's like something I do with my friends too, and political thinkers, and like that's the only way that we're actually gonna get any kind of progress, is if we stop masking it and stop accepting like just like the bare minimum, right? We stop accepting like, oh, this politician looks like me, so they can do no wrong, and start like actively thinking about what it means that an oppressive system is okay with this person existing within its confines, right? And that's important there, because, you know, already in the first weeks of voting, we've seen that Alessandra isn't there to necessarily like, you know, bare minimum is like abolish, I like work towards like abolishing ICE, right? If, as a matter of fact, like I mentioned before, she's there to fund it, right? She isn't there to necessarily, you know, put a wrench in these systems. She's just trying to make them more palatable, right? And that's again what neoliberalism does. It makes the systems of oppression palatable, right? And so we have to stop accepting that if we're going to get any type of progress. And next up we have this Shimmering highlighting powder by e.l.f. This is a sunset glow color, and we're going to use this to highlight. And so like that said, like this isn't like, again, like attacking her. It's just to highlight the fact that like she can do better. I think a lot of us root for her because we know that she can do better. But in order for her to do better, she needs to know that like in how she's let a lot of us down, right? A lot of leftists, a lot of folks who really trusted her to, you know, put her money where her mouth is, right? She supporter of socialism. She, you know, believes in a lot of things that, you know, bring progress. And so now it's like voting where her morals are, or her beliefs are. Otherwise, she's going to become another cog in a system. Is going to do more harm than good. And so, you know, right, it is commendable that she got into, you know, Congress, beat an incumbent dude who wasn't doing anything, and she did all that with just people power, right? And she didn't take any money from like corporate like or super PACs, right, which are like the thing. So all that is commendable. I like the, you know, even though I joked around about like the hoops and lipstick thing, like it was a cute little gesture, like, you know, it didn't really mean anything in the long run, but like I get what she's doing, and I get that a lot of, you know, young women of color are really inspired by her, and she's a big supporter of like LGBT folks as well. But like the policy that she supports shouldn't just end at like, you know, women of color in the US and LGBT people in the US, right? Because they're immigrants who are women of color and who are LGBT, right? I just think that like there's this culture of idolization that comes very easy to us, especially as people who are not usually represented in like anything. And I kind of want us to be more critical of that instead of just like idolizing people without any type of like critical eye. What did an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez look without the iconic red lipstick? Today we're using NYX Suede. It's a matte lipstick. I've never put lipstick on in my life. Like, I've worn lipstick, but I've never put it on myself. So like, don't judge me by how this looks. Oh, the tip is to draw. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Cupid's bow, you have one.
And now we're doing a setting spray, right? It's facial spray with aloe, cucumber, and green tea by Mario Badescu. Bloop. And so, yeah, I'm applying this liberally, just like the policy that we hope Alexandria Cortez doesn't completely, or that she challenges to be more leftist. But hopefully, like, the call-outs or that so that, you know, neoliberalism, like, doesn't set into her, like, her way of thought, her way of voting, you know? And so I get it. Like,
More away from your face. Mm-hmm.
and so I get it. Like, it can be, it can see, like, seem like people are being really unfair to her. Or even this, like, I use Alexandria in this example because she's the closest to, like, believing in a politician as I've ever come in my whole life. I don't believe in the system, like, straight up. Like, I don't. But, like, but if someone is claiming to want to make it better and to be progressive, then I want to trust that some good can come of that. And so I want to trust her. And because of that, like, I want to critique her, right? So that she can get better at this and like better represent the people who are rooting for her, right? And so this video can really be applied to any freaking liberal, but like I focus on her because I like her, and this look wouldn't be complete without the iconic first day in Congress hoops. Oh wow, this looks good. And so part of voting people who like represent us, right, is being able to call them out, right, when they're not actually representing us in our interest, right? Otherwise, this representation is just like as skin deep as this makeup. Wait, I cussed. Bleep that out. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this finished look. If you want to call me out in the comments, feel free to do so. And yeah, I'll see y'all next time. Bye. I would like to thank all my patrons, especially Danielle V, Juan Carlos E, and Chris N. Without their support and all my other patron support, none of my online work would be possible. If you'd like to support this channel as well as my podcast and my blogs, feel free to support me on patreon.com/queerchicano